Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Flex Network. I'm your host, as always, Flex Shane. You can follow me on Twitter at the Flex Network 1. If you like what you're listening to, if you're enjoying what you're watching, please like and subscribe. Leave comments on YouTube. We'd love a review in your podcast app. You can follow us obviously on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify. Pretty much anywhere you listen to podcasts is where you can find us. So we really appreciate it. We appreciate the reviews for the people who have done reviews so far. It means a lot to us. This is obviously a labor of love. So we are glad that you guys are enjoying what we're producing here. So today I'm flying solo once again because I wanted to finish my draft review part 2 with a focus this time just on the NFC. So of course, if you want to hear what I talked about on the AFC, that podcast dropped last Monday, just basically 2 days after the draft completed. And definitely give that one a listen to as well. So I'm not going to bury the lead. We're going to get right into it with the NFC. And I'm going to start on the NFC East because this is an interesting division. I think that in general, like the NFC East is kind of like the sexy division in the NFC. And, it's got the teams like Dallas, the Giants, Philly, and of course, those meddling Redskins. But I'm going to get started here with Dallas. So I would say overall, Dallas getting CeeDee Lamb at the 17th overall pick in round 1 was arguably one of the top steals of the draft because many people, myself included, the Flex Network included, did have CeeDee Lamb as our wide receiver 1. I mean, what else can you say about this guy? He's an absolute stud. People are saying he's going to be the wide receiver 3. There's maybe some worry that there's too many mouths to feed. But listen, a guy like CD, he's going to elevate everybody around him. I know that a guy like Amari Cooper had a pretty solid draft pedigree, and he was probably one of the best just pure recruits coming into the NFL, maybe a top 5, you would argue. But CeeDee Lamb is up there. He's absolutely talented. And now they're talking about, Dallas is in conversations with getting Dak paid finally. Most recently, I read that right now it's really just a number of years. So they have something like $35 million on the table for 4 years in front of Dak right now. Look, who am I to say that the guy can't get more money? But I think 4 years is a pretty reasonable contract. And if they can lock him up, then they've got CD on his rookie contract. They just signed Amari Cooper. It makes you worry a little bit about Michael Gallup, who I think last year, let's be honest, he outperformed expectations. A lot of people were high on him. He had a good rookie season, but then really in his sophomore year, he came out. And of course, Ezekiel Elliott, he's still there. So look, this is going to be a pretty competitive division. I think it's going to be probably between Dallas and Philly. But moving on to the Giants, they had a pretty good draft as well. So they drafted Andrew Thomas at the 1.4. And look, maybe people were a little bit surprised that they went specifically with Thomas. He was probably about the 4th or 5th ranked offensive lineman on the board. But look, if that's your guy and you want to protect your franchise quarterback, then I would say roll with it, man. You can't be upset as a Giants fan. You want them to protect their new franchise quarterback. So I love the fact that they did not go out and they didn't draft any wide receivers. Gettleman was pretty coy when he was asked about Darius Slayton at the Combine this year. He said, yeah, he's a good player, but he didn't really have glowing reviews for him. As a 5th-round pick, you'd have to argue that Darius Slayton was an absolute steal. I think that he's going to become Daniel Jones's number 1 target starting this year. So if you can get him in rounds 7 or 8 in your best balls, I would say roll with it. And I think that, the dynasty community obviously is high on Darius Slayton, but I don't think they quite value him right now. And I would put Darius Slayton up there with any of these, kind of second tier-ish, like the Michael Pittmans of the world in this rookie draft. And those guys are going right around the early 2nd round. So if you can get Darius Slayton for like a late 2nd, or maybe like a package of like a late 2nd, early 3rd, to me, that's worth it. It's a guy that I'm going after. And Darius Slayton, the Giants, look, arrows pointing up for the Giants. So I like it. Those Eagles, fly, Eagles, fly. Jalen Reagor how could you go wrong with a guy like Jalen Reagor? He's an absolute stud. In his third year at TCU, it was a little bit down. He only had 611 reception yards, but he had 5 touchdowns, and he had 384 special teams yards. You guys heard me talk about Jalen Reagor before the draft process. What you really have to look at is that sophomore season where he broke out with 1,061 receiving yards and 9 touchdowns. I would argue that he was at least in the conversation in terms of one of the top-ranked wide receivers on the board, over and above Jerry Jeudy and CeeDee Lamb. I wasn't quite there, but there's definitely, he's got his hive on Twitter as the wide receiver one in the class. And look, I mean, Philly's an aging offense right now. You saw what they were putting out at the end of the season. It was pretty much like, undrafted players. And to me, this is absolutely sick. I love Jalen Reagor. And, this is the kind of move that shows them that they're always kind of thinking ahead, right? I mean, they need their field stretcher. He's quick. He didn't run the fastest 40 when he was at the combine. He only had a 4.47, but apparently, I mean, he gained about 11 pounds from his profile on the TCU website, where he was put in at 195 pounds at the start of the 2019 season, and he weighed in at the combine at 206 pounds. He was also the guy who stood out on the podium as just being absolutely ripped. So you could argue that probably putting on some of that additional muscle may have slowed him down, but take it for what it is. But when he did his little, I guess it was almost like a private workout because they didn't have their pro days, he ran, I want to say, a 4.29. And that's, a lot of people were talking about Jalen Reagor right up there with Henry Ruggs in terms of the speed. So, man, watch out, Eagles fans. Of course, they went and they drafted Jalen Hurts. Look, Jalen Hurts is a guy that I loved coming into the process. I think I was unreasonably high on him just because you got to love that total absolute upside that he offers. And look, I would not be surprised if Jalen Hurts was the starting quarterback. All he needs is an opportunity. If he starts playing because of an injury to Carson Wentz, I think that he's the kind of player that he could take the reins and he can absolutely, I think he could take that number one quarterback position in Philly. The guy is a leader. Players love him. When he was drafted, he was acting like he was a starting quarterback. He was acting like he was picked at the 101, and that's just his mentality. The guy's a baller. I love it. And then some guy that you might want to consider late in your drafts. I actually just picked him up. I started my rookie drafts over the weekend. It's a guy that the Eagles took in the 5th round, John Hightower. They took him specifically at the 5.23 spot. I like John Hightower a lot. This is a guy, look, he's a 5th round pick in your rookie drafts. But if you're talking about upside at that point, his best comparable player on playerprofiler.com is actually Darius Slayton, who was picked at the 5.33. And really what this guy offers is he offers speed. He ran a 4.43 speed at the combine, and he's got a 10.19 foot catch radius, which is an 83rd percentile. He's a bit of a raw player. He's coming from Boise State. He only put up 639 yards and 1 TD, but he also had, those were special teams yards, 639 special teams yards and 1 TD. So that's the kind of talent that he is. I could see him returning punts for the Eagles, and maybe more of like a gadget player to start, but they're creative in Philly. I mean, you talk about some of these kind of gadgety players and you want them to go to the right team. I think that John Hightower going to the Philadelphia Eagles was the right team for him. And if any team's going to use him, I think they're going to do it. So I think wheels up for John Hightower, a good flyer pick in the 5th round of your rookie drafts. All right, moving on to Washington. Okay, so there was a lot of speculation as to whether or not they were going to trade out of the overall 2nd pick, but they got sick. They chose arguably the best pure player in the draft with Chase Young. It's the jury's still out in terms of if he's going to be a Hall of Famer, obviously, right? I mean, he's got the draft pedigree, he's got the talent. It's just, he's got to go on and produce. Who would to say before guys even played a single down in the NFL that he's going to be a Hall of Fame player? But that's the kind of profile that he has. So how could you possibly fault Washington for taking a guy like Chase Young? They did not have a 2nd round pick, but they came in the early 3rd round at the 2nd pick overall and chose Antonio Gibson. They listed him as a wide receiver. This was a guy that we loved. I mean, he had an absolute amazing Senior Bowl. Um, when Ron Rivera was asked about him this week on NFL radio, he said, "Look, I'm not trying to be coy. I'm not trying to dance around the subject, but he's just a dynamic football player." I mean, they asked, "Is he going to play running back? Is he going to play wide receiver?" I think he's going to be a bit of a hybrid. Anybody who's listening to the Flex Network knows how much I love Darius Geis. I am a Darius Geis apologist. Until Darius Geis is out of the league or relegated to a practice squad somewhere, I'm going to say that Darius Geis has the upside of being a number one RB. And frankly, he was in the conversation as the close, the 1-2 behind Saquon Barkley when they were drafted a couple of years ago. So I don't know if Antonio Gibson's going to be straight up a running back, but I like him. I want him on the field. I like what they're doing with that offense. You're going to have Antonio Gibson. You're going to have Terry McLaurin. If Darius Geis is healthy. Look, Dwayne Haskins last year, a lot of people were kind of iffy on him. He obviously did not produce last year. He was on the field, but he was still a rookie. He was still raw, and he didn't have a lot of talent around him. So he's got another year in the system. Obviously, what hurts him is the fact that there might not be a training camp or that there will be a condensed one. But I don't know, man. I mean, going back and talking about the NFC East, every team here, I like what they did in the draft. I think the arrow's pointing out for all four of these teams, but let's be honest. There's going to be a first place team in the division. There's going to be a fourth place team in the division. I could absolutely see, though, that the NFC East is going to produce one of the wild card teams. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be a lot of fun. All right. We are moving on to the NFC North. And, well, Bears fans, unfortunately, they didn't really instill a lot of confidence. They didn't have a first-round pick. Their first pick in the second round at the 11th spot, they went with Cole Kmet, who, look, a lot of people had him as a number one tight end on their board, but let's be honest here. I mean, it wasn't a great tight end class. I actually preferred a player that we're going to be talking about a little bit later with Adam Troutman. He was an absolute freak at the Senior Bowl. Definitely a riser, but Cole Kmet, what can you say other than meh, I guess? I don't know. They primarily went defensive. They did go with Darnell Mooney at the in the 5th round, wide receiver out of Tulane. He's not going to be fantasy relevant. So I don't know. He's 5'10", 176 pounds. He did run a 4.38 40, so the guy is quick. He's going to be, I don't know, a wide receiver 3. And look, Chicago is not picking up Mitch Trubisky's 5th-year option that was just announced, and they traded for Nick Foles. So when you have 2 quarterbacks, you got no quarterbacks, is what they say. And I'm worried about Chicago. Look, Allen Robinson, we love him. He's in a crappy situation. Anthony Miller, a roster watch favorite, the Golden Sun. Horrible landing spots. I'm worried, but kind of is what it is. Sorry, Bears fans. Moving on to Detroit. Okay, so Detroit. How do I feel about Detroit? They took Jeff Okudah at the overall number 3 position. I feel like that was a bit of a reach, taking a cornerback at 3 overall in the NFL draft, but we know that they're a defensive-minded team. Whatever. I'm not going to get sick on that. DeAndre Swift, though, I am going to get sick on at the 3rd overall pick in round 2. DeAndre Swift is a special talent. There's lots of conversations and lots of debate in terms of who was the number 1 running back prospect. DeAndre Swift was number 1 on a lot of people's boards. You guys know that he wasn't on number 1 on my board, but he was number 2. He's a special talent. He's the kind of player that you want to get the ball in his hands. He just looks, he's special, right? What else you guys have heard the analysis on DeAndre Swift. It kind of is what it is, but I kind of feel like this is the worst possible landing spot for him. Not because DeAndre Swift isn't going to just produce in any opportunity that he has, but they still have Kerryon Johnson, and you know that it's going to be a committee type role. When Swift is at Georgia, he ran 12 to 15 touches a game, which is probably what he's going to be doing. Now, you can argue that he's going to be a high producer when he gets those touches in his game, but I worry a little bit about the team overall. Matt Stafford hopefully is going to be back. And actually on Twitter, you may have seen recently just this week that Swift was working out with Matt Stafford. So you love to see that. You absolutely love to see that. These guys are consummate professionals, and I love Matt Stafford. Like, what can I say wrong about Matt Stafford? So it's not a death sentence. guys, but it's not great. Their offensive line was ranked 20th in pass blocking last year, but this year in the draft, in the third round, they took Jonah Jackson from Ohio State, who's going to be probably the right guard. And then at 415, they took Logan Sternberg, who's also an offensive guard. So they're trying to get a stout run offense. That's how they're going to win the game. Kerryon Johnson's still there, but is he going to stay healthy? And then they did go and they drafted Jason Huntley in the 5th round as well from New Mexico State. I kind of like Jason Huntley, actually, but he's going to be no more than depth at that position just because it is such a high injury risk position. I would be comfortable taking DeAndre Swift probably as my 4th or 5th ranked running back now. So it's not like it's a tumultuous fall, but you're still going to need to use one of your early rookie picks if you want to get DeAndre Swift. All right, moving on. Moving on to your Green Bay Packers. I don't know. I would say that probably one of the more confusing drafts. They trade up. Everybody, of course, is expecting that you're going to go and try to get one of these top wide receivers for Aaron Rodgers. What do? They go and they take Jordan Love at the 26th pick. A bit of a head scratcher. Obviously, they're looking down the road, but let's be honest here, guys. Like, Aaron Rodgers is not a spring chicken anymore. Most quarterbacks do not finish with the team that they were drafted with. I mean, Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Drew Brees. Like, the list goes on. And Brett Favre. The list goes on with the number of players that were drafted, quarterbacks, that is, had amazing careers with their teams, and then go to another team to finish off their career. That's just what's going to happen. And look, apparently there's maybe a bit of a culture challenge in Green Bay right now with LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers, but I don't know. Jordan Love's probably not going to be on the field for at least 2 years. And at that point, is this really a guy you want to be taking early in any of your rookie drafts, even in Superflex leagues? I am a little bit reluctant. I don't love it. They go and they get A.J. Dillon, running back out of Boston College, who, let's be honest, he's a plotter. I mean, he's a first and second down guy and probably a goal line guy. So you know what that does? That just absolutely eviscerates the Aaron Jones upside. I mean, Matt LaFleur said at the Combine that they want to get another running back in that running back room, and they spent second round draft capital, which is high for a running back. Though typically when you're spending a second round pick on a running back, that's the guy that you want to start on your team. And I don't think that A.J. Dillon's going to be starting because Aaron Jones is an absolute beast. He put up 19 touchdowns last year. So a bit of a head scratcher. I don't get it, but look, Green Bay fans, you were in the NFC Championship game last year, so maybe you don't need a lot to get to that next level. But when these other teams like the Saints are doing everything right, it seems like I don't know. It's a head scratcher, guys. I'm sorry, Green Bay fans, but I don't love it. I don't love it. Moving on to the Minnesota Vikings. Now this is a team that I do love. Justin Jefferson, LSU wide receiver, picked at the 1-2-2. Justin Jefferson, man, he was a stud in college. What else is there to say? I mean, he's a local boy. He went to Destrehan High School. He gets onto the LSU team. Essentially, just his dad had a relationship with the coach. He's a good football player. I want to say he was a 2-star recruit coming out of high school. And what did he do? He elevated himself. And look, I understand that he was on LSU, which is, of course, a historic offense. But Justin Jefferson stepped up in that historic offense. And that absolutely matters. He had pretty gaudy numbers. And this wasn't even the one on this team, which is disgusting. But he had 111 receptions, 1,540 receiving yards, and 18 receiving touchdowns. 18 receiving touchdowns last year. That's pretty sick. There's going to be some question because primarily he operated out of the slot. Of course, that's where Adam Thielen is, but he's the future. Adam Thielen is not a spring chicken, as we just talked about. Minnesota is going to be a running team. I like them actually to use a lot of 12 personnel this year. They're going to use Irv Smith, who I think is going to take another step forward this year. They've got Kyle Rudolph, who they just extended. Justin Jefferson, who, by the way, guys, best comparable player, Reggie Wayne. last I checked, Reggie Williams was a pretty damn good wide receiver in the league. It's going to be Justin Jefferson. It's going to be Adam Thielen. And then it's going to be a lot of Dalvin Cook. And Minnesota's they're just a grinding kind of team. So Justin Jefferson, he might not have the upside, but if it's going to be a 2 wide receiver sets, he's going to get fed. So I like it. From a fantasy perspective, I am probably taking Justin Jefferson as either my number 2 or number 3 wide receiver off the board. And that's ahead of Jerry Jeudy. So the only guy that I would have definitively ahead of him still would be a guy like CeeDee Lamb. So take that for what it is. Love Justin Jefferson. All right. That is it for the NFC North. Moving on to the NFC South, which is kind of interesting, actually, because the NFC South is, it's mostly dome teams or warm weather teams. They are high offensive teams. And yet most of the teams went and they took defensive players, which is actually kind of a good thing, right? Because you know what you're going to be getting with the rest of these teams. So starting off with Atlanta, at the 16th pick overall, they went A.J. Terrell, which is a cornerback. So they're addressing defense. At their second pick, they took a defensive tackle. They did take a center in the 3rd round, but then they went inside linebacker, safety, and then they went with a punter. So overall, I would say, yeah, what can you say? I mean, Atlanta wheels up. Riley Ridley, a lot of people are pretty high on him. Julio Jones, he's getting up there in age, but he's still an elite talent. Hayden Hurst, they traded for him this year. They spent a 2nd-round pick on him. And look, Atlanta's going to continue to put up points. Don't be afraid. In Dynasty, if you can trade Julio Jones, I think now is the time to do it. People are still reluctant, so you might not get exactly what you want for him in terms of value. But if you wait maybe to the first couple weeks into the season, I think you'd probably be better off trading a guy like Julio Jones. Carolina, same story. Of course, they went out and they got Teddy Bridgewater this year as their quarterback. You guys know how much I love DJ Moore. On another podcast, we're going to do a bit of a breakdown between him and another very special player. So DJ Moore, I would argue, is probably going to be one of the top 3 wide receivers in Dynasty. It's a guy you still want to go after and get, but unfortunately, he's going to cost you a small fortune. You guys know that I traded the 106 and the 108 in a Superflex league for DJ Moore. That's an overpay. I'm going to be honest. It's an overpay because you're going to be getting guys like potentially Cam Akers, and then maybe a guy like Justin Herbert may fall. But he's a special talent, and he's a guy that I want on my team. So you got to pay to play, New Orleans Saints, of course, they took Cesar Ruiz at the 124, and the Saints are in it to win it this year. Let's call it what it is. Drew Brees signs a 1-year deal with the Saints. He wants to win it. I'm excited. They, of course, have the best wide receiver in football right now with Michael Thomas. They still have Alvin Kamara, who's primarily hurt last year, but he's going to get sick this year. Latavius Murray signed with the team. Emmanuel Sanders, they went out and they got, so they're replacing the long ball play. And watch out for those Saints. One guy that I do want to talk about, of course, is Adam Trautman out of Dayton. He was a senior. He played at the Senior Bowl. He absolutely beasted. He was a 41st overall pick. I think that, look, tight end, it takes a couple years to develop. So people who are drafting him because he's going to be playing with Drew Brees, I think you're kind of fooling yourself a little bit because Jared Cook still is there, but he's a special talent. I think that if you give this guy a year or two, in tight end premium leagues especially, if you can get this guy in the early third round of your rookie picks, I think that's an absolute value, and that's where I would pull the trigger on this guy. But other than that, I mean, man, it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. And finally, of course, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who could we argue that the Bucs had probably one of the best off seasons of any team? I mean, of course, they got Tom Brady. Like, you're obviously living in a rock if we don't know that they got Tom Brady. But at the 13th overall pick, they got offensive tackle Tristan Wirfs, who he was number 1 on a lot of people's boards. And the fact that he fell at the freaking 13 is an absolute steal. One of my favorite guys. He was actually my 6th ranked running back this year. We were doing our mock draft last month, and I was arguing that you could probably take this guy around the 8th. This was before he was drafted. I didn't get laughed out of the room, but I got a lot of the eyebrow look saying, "What are you talking about?" Keyshawn Vaughn running back out of Vanderbilt, went to Tampa Bay. See you later, Ronald Jones. See you later. I love Keyshawn Vaughn. Ah, man. So Keyshawn Vaughn is the kind of player that he's quick first step. He is 214 pounds. He's 5'10". He's got a 30.7 BMI because the guy is ripped. He had a reasonable speed score with a 4.51 40-yard dash, a 103.5 speed score. He had a 32-inch vertical jump, and he is best comparable to a guy that you might know. He's pretty good in fantasy. Oh yeah, his name is Dalvin Cook. So you get a guy like Dalvin Cook going to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He arguably isn't the best pass catcher, but Keyshawn Vaughn still had 28 receptions in his senior year, and he had 161 receiving yards, 1,028 rushing yards, and 10 total rushing touchdowns. This is going to be your RB1 in Tampa Bay. People talked about kind of the nut spot for a guy like CEH or DeAndre Swift would have been Tampa Bay. Well, guess what? They got Keyshawn Vaughn. I just took him at the 108 in one of my rookie drafts, and I am absolutely ecstatic that he fell there. I would take him. Look, it's a conversation between CD at the 106 or Keyshawn Vaughn at the 106. And at that point, I'm probably still going to go with Keyshawn Vaughn because I feel like Vaughn is the kind of player that can have an immediate impact on your fantasy team. And if you're always trying to win for next year, you're never going to win. Take Keyshawn Vaughn, get sick, be proud of it, and move the hell on because guess what? Tampa Bay is going to be exciting. Absolutely exciting. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay. Can you guys tell that I like him? Yeah. Another guy, of course, you might have argued he fell down the board, but Tyler Johnson, they got him in the 5th round. And Tyler Johnson he was a Twitter favorite, right? Everybody knows about Tyler Johnson. He was an athletic freak. He put up all the, like the raw accounting yards, but, people were saying that he wasn't going to really go super high in the draft. He didn't go to the Senior Bowl. Actually, he didn't get invited to the Senior Bowl. He didn't test at the Combine, but he had a 57.2% college dominator rating according to playerprofiler.com, and a 45% is considered elite for a prospect. His best college yards per reception season was 19.3, and he had a 17.3 on average college yards per reception. So I like him. He's 6'2", 206 pounds. And you guys remember a player named Rashad Perriman who people thought he was dead? Well, when Chris Godwin and Mike Evans went down last year, Perriman stepped up. And Johnson has that upside. And he's a guy that if you can get him probably middle of the 4th round, I think that's an absolute value for Tyler Johnson. I believe he fell to the 4th round in both of my rookie drafts that have started this weekend. So it's attainable, and he's a pure upside play. I mean, when you're that late in your draft, there's not a lot of players out there. Get sick, take Tyler Johnson, and do not regret it. All right. Okay, moving on finally to the NFC West. All right, so the Arizona Cardinals, same thing. They didn't really have a lot of picks this year. But they didn't really need a lot of picks because they had a hell of an offseason. They went out and they got, you guys know him, DeAndre Hopkins, one of my favorite wide receivers. He's an amazing talent. He's an amazing person. He's a leader in the locker room. And they got him for pretty much, a pack of salted peanuts, essentially. And then they signed Kenyon Drake as a running back. So I love it. How can you go wrong with that? But the guy that they did pick that, don't forget about, another player you can probably get around your 4th round pick in your rookie drafts is Eno Benjamin, running back at Arizona State. So local boy, which you love, right? Because he knows that your scouts were aware of him. But Eno Benjamin was a guy who quietly I kind of liked, in the offseason. He was one of the standouts the week of the Senior Bowl in the sense that he performed during the game. So Eno Benjamin, I think that if you're taking a flyer on somebody, he's absolutely somebody you can take. He's not going to have an immediate impact this year, but Kenyon Drake, he's getting up there in age. There's always injuries. And, Benjamin, man, like I think that he's somebody you can take and be happy with. He's only 20 years old. He's 207 pounds. He has a 30.6 BMI. So again, he's a thick dude, and he's best comparable to Duke Johnson. And a lot of people love Duke Johnson. You could argue that Duke didn't quite get the opportunity. Everywhere he went, he was always going to be the backup. And maybe that's what Eno Benjamin is. But he had a 37.4 college dominator rating, and he's just a solid prospect. So you can't really go wrong. I like what Arizona's doing. He's depth, but he's definitely upside. Okay, so moving on to the LA Rams. Love that they took Cam Akers. Some people don't love the pick simply because Cam Akers, because he was on such a crappy team at Florida State, he probably didn't have the raw talent or the raw accounting stats that a player like J.K. Dobbins may have had. But at 5'10", 217 pounds, Cam Akers is an absolute stud. I've talked about it a lot, but he had the 115th ranked offensive line in college. He goes to the Rams, who have the 19th ranked run blocking per Football Outsiders. And I can't take credit for this comment, but Jeff Ratcliffe from PFF, guy that I respect a lot, he always talks about how things can change. The Rams had the number 2 ranked offensive line in 2018, and then it went all the way down to the 19th ranked offensive line. So the fact that they're taking Cam Akers, we talk about draft capital. I love Cam Akers. I actually just got him at the 106 in one of my rookie drafts, and I was absolutely ecstatic that he fell there. I think that he's got RB1 upside potential, and I love it. Van Jefferson at the 225, I feel like was kind of a reach. He's a good player. His BMI is 25.7 though, which is slight. He's 6'2", 210 pounds. 200 pounds. And I mean, he had a pretty decent week at the Senior Bowl. He's always open. He can get good separations, but I'm not confident he can really get to that next level. His best comparable player is Riley Ridley, and he did 22.1 breakout age, which for wide receiver, it's a little bit more telling when it's a later breakout age. So I worry taking them in the second round when there's a lot of other talented wide receivers on the board, to me, was a bit of a reach. But I mean, look, at 227, Denzel Mims went. I would have much rather had a guy like Denzel Mims and just got absolutely sick over Van Jefferson, or even a guy like Brian Edwards who the Raiders took at 317. So that one was a bit of a head scratcher. I mean, if they would have taken him in the 3rd or 4th round, I probably would have been a little bit more okay with it. But I just feel like using that second round draft capital when you've got a lot of other needs right now, I didn't love it. So it's going to be a tough year for the Rams, but I love Cam Akers. Don't be afraid to put him on your team. We're going to be talking a little bit later on another show about where we want to take these rookies in our best ball leagues, and then obviously leading into redraft season. And Cam Akers is up there. So I love it. And Rams, we're going to give you like a B- overall for your draft. All right, Seattle. Look, Seattle, man, they went out there and they went defense just like Seattle does. They did take the running back DJ Dallas in the 4th round. I'll be honest with you guys. I had a little bit of a blind spot for DJ Dallas, but as I've started looking at some game tape, it's a guy that I like. It's a player that I like. But guys, wheels up for Chris Carson. And you know what? Even Rashad Penny, right? I mean, if he can get healthy, he's a guy that I was taking late in my best ball drafts, but he pretty much fell off the board leading into the draft because many people were convinced that Seattle was going to take a running back. They didn't really take a high pedigree running back. So I like Chris Carson. DK Metcalf's going to take another step forward. I think that this team is going to become hopefully more and more of a passing team, which is what we as fantasy gamers want. Russell Wilson's going to get sick. Perennially underrated Russell Wilson. You can probably get him as like the 5th or 6th overall quarterback. Wheels up, man. Wheels up. Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, Chris Carson. You guys know the names. Draft those players with confidence. And that's all I have to say about Seattle. All righty. Moving on to San Francisco. Yeah, I don't sing, guys. Sorry. A lot of people thought that they were going to take one of the top wide receivers at the 14th overall pick. They didn't do that. They took Javon Kinlaw, defensive tackle, which Good Lord, the rich get richer. Javon Kinlaw is an absolute stud, man. The Niners, they have ambitions to go back to the Super Bowl. And look, 3 quarters in, they were winning that Super Bowl. So I think they can do it. I think that San Fran's going to be a favorite and should be a favorite to get back to the Super Bowl. They took Brandon Ayuk at the 25th overall pick in the first round. Arizona State wide receiver. You guys know how much I loved his fellow teammate last year, N'Keal Harry. Some very respected draft analysts, including Jim Nagy, who runs the Senior Bowl, had basically indicated that Brandon Ayuk had a higher graded profile by many draft scouts than N'Keal Harry. So it's not surprising that he went in the first round. But overall, I mean, there's other players that I would have preferred, and they're going to use them though. They get very creative. So I love it. And of course, they went out and they got Trent Williams in the trade with the Washington Redskins. So you have to love it. And I would say overall, they're probably a favorite to get back to the Super Bowl. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you like what you've heard, please follow us. You can follow us on Twitter at the Flex Network 1. Please like and subscribe. It's going to be a fun season. We're going to be here all off season. Hopefully, we get some camps later in the summertime. And look, the world slowly seems to be opening up. So maybe let's be positive, people. Let's be positive. Let's flex on COVID. Let's hope for something that can distract us from all this stuff. And let's hopefully get some football in the spring and summer. And we'll go from there. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Flex Shane. We are the Flex Network.